Hey, vinyl community, we are here once again, our weekly music discussion with my four favorite people in the VC. We have Gary from Physical Format Rock and Roll, Chris Profi, Musically Obsessed, JC, Flipside Vinyl, and of course, the ambassador of the VC LT King, Aaron Mutha Alamere. And tonight's discussion, we're going to be talking about our top 5 albums from the 1960s. Not necessarily the best albums of the 1960s, but our favorite albums of the 1960s, more or less. So we have allowed ourselves one honorable mention, and I'm going to go clockwise order. So Gary, you are to my right, then Chris, then Josh, then Aaron. So Gary, you want to give your honorable mention?
Sure. So I went with an album that came out in 1968, and that would be Truth by the Jeff Beck Group. This, of course, would have been the first full album that he did after leaving the Yardbirds. His manager tried to turn him into kind of a pop star there for a while. He had a few singles where Jeff Beck actually sang on these songs, but it wasn't the type of music that he wanted to do. So he formed his own group with a then unknown singer named Rod Stewart. Had Ron Wood on bass and Mickey Waller, I think, on drums. But this album it might not be quite as big as some of the other albums we're going to talk about tonight, but it's still very influential. Jeff Beck is quite the guitar hero, and a lot of people, myself included, consider this some of the best stuff that Rod Stewart ever did. His vocals are great on the 2 albums that he is on, and this album actually preceded Led Zeppelin's first album by about 6 months or so, and there are some definite similarities to the album. It's got a lot of cover songs and some original songs, but it's all over the place. It's got some blues, it's got some psychedelia, it's got everything on here, and it's just an overall really good rocking record. So that's my honorable mention, Truth.
I love how Martin Scorsese used the song Ain't Superstitious in the movie Casino.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a great marriage of visual and audio there. That was perfect.
Yeah, that's a good call there.
All right, Chris.
All right, my honorable mention is going to go to an album that came out in 1969. It's Miles Davis, In a Silent Way. I was really hoping Bitches Brew would have come out in the 60s, but it came out in 1970, so I missed it by 1 year because I would have definitely picked Bitches Brew. But this is the next best thing. This is the album that came out before Bitches Brew, and this was sort of like a changing of the guard for jazz. It was also a changing of the guard for Miles Davis. This is sort of the birth of the fusion era. And I'm going to read off the hype sticker. I know JC loves hype stickers. Listen to who's on this album. Wayne Shorter, John McLaughlin on guitar, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Dave Holland, Tony Williams, and I always mispronounce this guy's name, Joe Zawinul, I want to say his name is, but it's like the who's who of jazz. And Miles Davis was such a cool cat. Like, he kept changing his sound, and then people were like, oh, what's Miles going to do next? And like his next album, Bitches Brew, as we know, or maybe some of us out there who are watching don't know, that changed the face of jazz again. And, I think jazz fusion, and for me, like, jazz fusion is what got me into jazz, because I'm coming from the rock world. And, Miles Davis started to say, hey, I like what Jimi Hendrix is doing. I like what Sly and the Family Stone is doing. I like what James Brown is doing. Like, I want to incorporate some of those elements into jazz. And I think he actually ended up selling more records and getting more kids turned on to jazz. So, huge album.
Yeah, that album always gets overshadowed by Bitches Brew because it was the one that came after, and that was the one that kind of set the jazz world on fire. But In a Silent Way is a fantastic album.
Love it. Love it.
Absolutely. And you know, during that era, he was opening some dates for Neil Young. He was the opening act.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, great, fantastic album.
Yeah, I have a video of him playing the Isle of Wight, I want to say, festival. And he is just ripping it up on the trumpet. His band is killing it. And it's like, yeah, it gave jazz a kick in the ass. Now, there are jazz purists who are like, I'm not going to listen to 70s Miles Davis. That's not true jazz. But I don't know, maybe it's not, but it's a form of jazz. And I happen to really like fusion. So.
And I think he opened for the Monkees also.
Yeah, and Jack Pyle as well.
Everyone opened for Jack Pyle.
Yeah, why didn't I pick the Monkees?
All right, guys. So I was not going to choose a Beatles album just because I really could do a top 5 and have them all be Beatles. I absolutely love the Beatles album, but I am going to include one an honorable mention. In all actuality, this could be my number 1 album of the 60s, but I'm going to do it as an honorable mention. I'm going to show another one that was my original honorable mention, but I just could not include a Beatles. And everybody knows that Rubber Soul is my favorite Beatles. I love Abbey Road. I love Let It Be. I love Revolver. I mean, I love almost all their records. I probably love all their records, but this one is just the memories associated with it. It was my father's favorite record, so he'd play it every single weekend. So to me, this album sounds like Sunday morning. But the album that was my honorable mention was Miss Karen Dalton. And this is It's So Hard to Tell Who's Going to Love You Best. This is a absolutely fantastic album. Her voice is completely haunting. And I will tell you that, you know, if you've never heard this, Little Bit of Rain, Sweet Substitute, Ribbon Bow, and It Hurts Me Too are all classics. It's just, this has never gotten the prestige or the notoriety that it probably deserves, but it's one of my favorite albums, and I play it all the time.
Cool. Josh, back to Rubber Soul. Do you prefer the UK or the American Rubber Soul?
It's the American just because it's what I grew up listening to, but I have nothing against the UK, and it's probably neck and neck.
Yeah, I've heard an interesting memory. My uncle, he was the one member of my family who was like heavily into music, heavily into the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Rolling Stones. And I remember he went to the record store and he picked me up Rubber Soul and gave it to me. And I had only heard Michelle. I wasn't familiar with anything else on that American version of Rubber Soul because it doesn't have Drive My Car. It doesn't have Nowhere Man. It doesn't have, you know, the stuff that you're familiar with, you know, the bigger, better known songs, I guess you could say, off the UK version of it. And he's like, this is one of the best albums ever recorded. And I played it, and it's got that folk rock feel to it because it opens with I've Just Seen a Face right into Norwegian Wood. And then you've got You Won't See Me, and you don't get Drive My Car and Nowhere Man. You know, it makes it more kind of an acoustic folk rock sounding record. And yeah, I've always been a bigger fan of the American version of it because I've got that nostalgia like you do for that record. And it's weird to me to have, you know, What Goes On Rubber Soul and, you know, Nowhere Man on Rubber Soul. It's like, you know, that's on Yesterday and Today. What is that doing on Rubber Soul? But yeah, that's a great pick.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. All right, Aaron.
So this is my only compilation I'm putting in here, but I had to put this as one of my favorite bands. This is The Best of the Animals, and I'm a huge Animals fan, but I just feel like this is their best thing, just because it's got all their songs I love on it, even though I like their other album, you know, their regular albums, but, you know, it's got, you know, We Got to Get Out of This Place, but, you know, House of the Rising Sun, Boom Boom, you know, it's great. And I really love, like, I'm Mad and It's My Life. And Eric Burden was a very underrated singer, really good. And I kind of feel like this band influenced the Doors a bit because just the sound with the organ and the bad boy image thing. And I feel like without the Animals, the Doors wouldn't have quite been what they were. And I actually like this better. And it's just one of my favorite albums. a lot of bands I don't like compilations as well, but this one I do.
Yeah, they influence Wasp also.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Actually,
Blackie Lawless said that actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So my honorable mention is, and for my list, I said, okay, I'm not putting Pet Sounds on here, even though I consider it one of the best albums of the 1960s. I felt that was too predictable. So you're not going to, you know, spoiler alert, you're not going to see Pet Sounds on my list, but I'm going to pick an artist that I love a lot. Don't hear, I mean, I don't know. It's not an artist that I talk about that much on my channel, but you know, this album is one of my favorite albums of the 1960s, and it is Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited. I love Bob Dylan, and I love his 60s work. I love his stuff in the 70s. This one is one that I just listen to time and time again. People say, well, Blonde on Blonde was better, but it's just a little too sprawling, a little too much to absorb for me. This is one you can just put on, listen to, and it's a fun record. He's having fun with the lyrics. There's a lot of surreal imagery, and it's just very cool. I mean, obviously, like a Rolling Stone is on here, but Tombstone Blues is a lot of fun. It Takes a Lot to Laugh, Takes a Train to Cry is great. Ballad of a Thin Man, Queen Jane, approximately. Highway 61 Revisited with kind of the biblical references on it. It's just a fun record and one of my favorite all-time Bob Dylan records. So that's my honorable mention.
Great record.
That came so close to making my list. There is a Bob Dylan on my list, but that I debated all day on which one to go with. And that was so close. I love that album.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yep.
Yeah, good pick.
All right, so we're now on our number 5, Gary.
Okay, number 5 from 1966. And I, like you guys, I just went back and forth deciding which one to pick, but I went for Revolver by the Beatles, just because this is the first vinyl of the Beatles I ever got. And I love this time period. And I like the fact that, you know, this is right when they stopped touring, I think, right after this album. So this album was made, you know, with more experimentation in the studio. You know, this would lead to Sgt. Pepper's and all this, but I mean, I prefer this over Sgt. Pepper's myself. I think every song on here is good. It just represents all the different kind of faces of the Beatles. You know, you got the like super poppy stuff. You've got some psychedelic stuff. You've got killer George Harrison songs on here. And, you know, this is, I don't know. I just feel like there's everything on here that I want from a Beatles record. And, you know, this is just one of the ones that I felt I went back and forth on which Beatles record I wanted to pick. And I had the White Album up until the last second. And I'm like, no, I really love Revolver. I love this time period. And this is just me, a fantastic record. I find no fault with it. So I'm going Revolver for number 5.
Great choice.
One of my
Here,
favorite.
There, and Everywhere is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah. Yes.
Me. I love Taxman.
Taxman. George Harrison's my favorite Beatle, believe it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, he's got some great songs, you know, when he's in the Beatles. And to me, my favorite songs on this album, well, except for maybe Eleanor Rigby, are the George Harrison songs.
Yeah.
One on the American album, he's got more songs on there than John does.
Mm-hmm.
John's only got Tomorrow Never Knows and She Said, and George has 3 songs on there. So,
Yeah, and that's what I have. So,
Tom Petty was friends with George Harrison. He said George Harrison was the type of guy that would show up at your house at 11 o'clock at night with his kids, 2 cases of beer and 2 ukuleles, being like, hey, the kids can fall asleep. We'll just stay up all night drinking and playing guitars. And he said George Harrison really was that type of guy. He would just show up with cases of beer and want to just sing all night, you know, on a ukulele.
That's funny because like when you see interviews and stuff, he's always so reserved.
Yeah.
You know, wouldn't it be great to be able to see that side of him, you know, like Tom Petty. Oh yeah, you know, me and George Harrison just hanging out. I get to see the real him.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know if you've ever seen the Dick Cavett interviews, like with George Harrison.
Oh yeah.
But you know, he's just kind of like, it's like he just can't stand the idea of being there, being interviewed.
Yeah, well, he was, you know, he financed Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Yeah,
yeah.
You know, because he was such a Monty Python fan, and they couldn't get, you know, I mean, unbelievably, I mean, not to get into a Monty Python discussion, but you know, after the Holy Grail, like you can't get, you know, you can't pull together enough money. But I think it was because, you know, they needed to tell that story and such, you know, elaborate. So, but anyway, I digress. But yeah, but just to show, George Harrison had, you know, one of the best sense of humors of any Beatle, you know, besides John Lennon. But yeah.
He was probably a lot less neurotic than John Lennon also. He just seemed a lot more down to earth.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah. All right, Chris.
All right, well, I'm going with an album from 1968, and this album I feel should be mentioned more in the beginnings of heavy metal, and I'm going with Iron Butterflies in In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. I just love this freaking record. I love Iron Butterfly. Their album that followed this, Ball, is good as well. But you know, this, of course, has the title track, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, which we all know and love. It takes up all of side 2. It's over 17 minutes long. But the first side is great too. I mean, there's a really heavy song called Are You Happy? Some like sort of 60s psychedelic stuff. They got a song called Flowers and Beads. I love the lead singer. His name is Doug Ingle. He's right here. He's got a kick-ass voice. And, you know, I just love how he plays. It basically, it's the church organ. So it gave Iron Butterfly a really unique sound. And, you know, I've said this before too, the band Slayer covered In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida on the Less Than Zero soundtrack. So that just goes to show you Slayer being one of the most heavy, brutal metal acts covering an Iron Butterfly song. So, I mean, these guys have got to be mentioned in the early heavy metal, you know, the brewing of the heavy metal. But it, you know, it's just a great 60s. It just has that 60s vibe. I mean, look at the cover too. It's like,
yeah,
I wish I did drugs because that's awesome right there. And I
the
love
name itself.
Yeah. Isn't that how what was Ronnie? Oh, I want to say, didn't Ronnie James Dio's Elf have that sort of font on one of their albums? I want to say.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just a cool 60s vibe. The whole record, I love it. So there you go.
That's a great.
I'm waving the Iron Butterfly flag. I don't think they. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. Yeah.
Well, but people just were not putting sidelong songs on a record. I mean, that was really kind of groundbreaking, you know, when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a single version of it as well, but the drum solo in that song, it just takes you on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish I did drugs.
John Bonham was at a show watching them, and he was laughing at the drummer, said how horrible he was, but I think he's a great drummer.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, too, anybody who just knows Iron Butterfly for In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, check out the album Ball. It's a great, I actually sometimes like it a little bit more than In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. But, you know, both records are killer.
So my next pick is from 1963, and I really struggled with it, and it's probably shocking to some people, but I really love Phil Spector and his wall of sound, and I almost went with the Ronettes. They had one album that came out in the 60s, and I really love like Ronnie Spector's voice, but this was difficult. But this literally is one of my favorite albums of all time, and it's a Christmas album, and it's called A Christmas Gift to You. And
that's a great album.
Fantastic. Wow. If you've ever seen a Martin Scorsese movie, then you've heard every single one of these songs. It's got the Ronettes on it, who I love the Ronettes. It's got Darlene Love. I love Darlene Love. It's also got the Crystals and Bob B. Sox and the Blue Jeans. But really, the Ronettes and Darlene Love steal the show. It's got White Christmas, Frosty the Snowman. It's got Santa Claus Coming to Town. I know you guys are thinking, like, if you've never heard this album, like, that sounds lame. But go listen to the versions they do. It has that classic Phil Spector wall of sound with the echo and the reverb and the fantastic voices. This is just a masterpiece. This is the original press. I almost chose the Ronettes album. They have one album. If you ever see it in the wild, get it. Which I have an OG press of that too. And they're just two fantastic albums. When I think of pop music, when people say, do you listen to pop music from the 60s really resonates with me. I really love that era of pop music. But yeah. So
that album is Christmas. Like, they took Christmas and they put it inside of there.
Totally. I can't have
when you play it, you let Christmas out. You like that? It's going with it. It's total Christmas though. I love that record.
Yeah, it's a definitive version of Frosty the Snowman. You know, I'm not kidding either. I'm not like trying to be silly. I'm like serious.
That made and again, Rolling Stone. I'm not saying Rolling Stone is the be all, but that made Rolling Stone's top 500 albums of all time.
Yeah,
I really feel it is. I feel like it took the idea of Christmas albums to the next level. Before that was really just like the Bing Crosbys, and all of a sudden you started seeing these rock acts do Christmas albums. It became very fashionable in the 80s, as we all know. But that album to me is like, Chris said, is the sound of Christmas. Like, I can't imagine Christmas Eve without that record on the turntable, the family drinking some spiked eggnog, kids opening their presents. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it makes me feel so good. I love it.
Wow.
Yeah,
I got to find it.
It's my favorite version of, every song. That's the definitive version of those classics on there.
Yeah.
I love Blackie Lawless, his guitar work on that album.
He was a young session musician.
He was 10 years old and he had his guitar here. He's like, can we add the word fuck to this song? We're like, no, you can't add fuck to Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah.
So
Nobody does that yet.
Can I just ask, why does Wasp always come into every freaking conversation?
Because you
what
bring
is it about
it.
Wasp? No, but Jeff brought it up first.
Well, I'm happy to talk about Wasp. There's no.
They're blind in Texas.
I love Wasp. They're great band.
Too.
You know me, I'm all about Wasp.
Yeah, because when you picture a Wasp fan, you think of Jeff or I, because we look just like Wasp.
Well, Aaron, he's got his Super Grail, like, Wasp's entire discography are my Super Grails, right?
Hey, we can remedy that, so don't get too excited.
Yeah. All right, Aaron.
Mine's from 1968, and it's a debut from one of my favorite bands. It's Shades of Deep Purple.
Oh, I love that record.
Yeah, it's great. And originally they were called Roundabouts because it was formed by originally the drummer, what's his name, Chris Curtis. And he was going to be the only permanent member. And then other people would come up on stage and play and have a revolving door of musicians play with them. And they recruited John Lord and Richie Blackmore. And so they kind of became part of it. And he lost interest. And then they kind of formed this group, the Deep Purple. And originally they auditioned all kinds of singers before they got to Rod Evans, including Rod Stewart. They didn't think his voice was good enough for some reason. Kind of odd. Rod Stewart would have been in Deep Purple, and then they asked Ian Gillan to audition, and he declined, which is another strange thing. And this album is just amazing, though. And Rod Evans is a great singer, and this and when you listen to it, it's got the psychedelic stuff, and I really like how they do the cover songs on here. And I couldn't hear Hey Joe without picturing Jeff when I was listening to it. Every time I hear Hey Joe, it's going to be a Jeff in my mind. But it's really And their version of Help on here is really cool. It's like slowed down and really different than the Beatles version. I really like how they do it. And, you know, they do, it's 4 covers, 4 originals. And the Address is great. Mandrake Root is a great song. That was an original instrumental, and then Rod Evans put lyrics to it.
And Hush is on there too, right?
Yeah, Hush was the single. That's the only single they had from here. And that actually hit number 4 in the US charts. This actually didn't do that well in Europe, I don't think. It did really well. Hush didn't, and it did really well in America. But yeah, great record. I love it.
And a lot of people don't.
Go ahead.
What you and I'm being serious here. I'm not joking right now. A lot of people don't know that Rod Evans went from Deep Purple into a band called Captain Beyond with a member of Iron Butterfly. And I'm trying to remember whether it was Lee Dorman or Ron Bushy. I can't remember, but somebody in the comments will probably let me know. But yeah, so you had a member from Iron Butterfly and a member from Deep Purple who formed Captain Beyond.
Yeah, that's great too. But
it's great. Know that.
I love the Book of Taliesin, but I went with this one.
Well, and that version of Help, ironically, is closer to the way John Lennon actually intended it to be. And there's a demo of John Lennon, I think it's like 1971, where he re-recorded Help and he had it slowed down, and it's much closer to the version that's on Shades of Deep Purple, because he always felt that version that was on the Help soundtrack, like they made it too commercial, they made it too happy and poppy, which is not at all. You know, it's very much at odds with the lyrics. And so, you know, the way that they covered it is a lot closer to how John Lennon envisioned that song than the way the Beatles recorded it. But
what's strange though is if you wonder why a band just starting out would be covering Beatles songs. Like, it's almost like, what, you think you can do it better than the Beatles? Or I don't know. It's just sort of a strange idea for a band starting out to cover one of the biggest band's songs. I mean, maybe they were thinking for radio airplay, or I don't know. It's just sort of a strange thing.
Well, Yes covered What You're Doing on their first album.
Who did?
Yes. The band, Yes.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess maybe people just figured everybody likes the Beatles, so we'll cover a Beatles song.
Yeah. And Chris, I think that the record companies would really force these bands to do covers. Like Van Halen, they were pressured to do covers. You know, it's just one of the things in the 60s and 70s that, you know, people felt the pressure from the record company. You know, we don't hear a single, we need you to put a cover on here, that type of thing.
Well, and you're right. I think that was the time when everybody was covering everybody. So, like, you know, everybody did their version of Blowing in the Wind or whatever song it was. But
yeah.
That doesn't seem to happen that much anymore.
A lot of times they play them live a lot too, so they were used to playing them.
Yeah.
Think about how many people covered Bob Dylan and had bigger hits. Jimi Hendrix, you know, and the Byrds, and
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 5, this is a band's debut album. It is from 1969. It might be my favorite album by this band, but I am going to go with Led Zeppelin's debut album. This reminds me a lot of Van Halen's first album, actually. I mean, it's a killer record. It was so revolutionary when it came out at the time. You've got a couple covers on here, albeit, you know, Willie Dixon covers, but still, one of my favorite moments on this album is Your Time Is Gonna Come, that beginning where you've got that church organ, and it's just, you almost sound like it feels like you're in church, and then it just sort of like drifts into silence, and then you get like the riff right before you get that drum crash, and then the acoustic. It's just one of my favorite Led Zeppelin moments. Love this album. You got Good Times, Bad Times. I owned it on cassette first, and so for whatever reason, they flipped the sides. And so on side A, it opened with Your Time Is Gonna Come, and then Black Mountain Side or whatever. So I was always used to that being side 1. And then, you know, got the album, and I'm like, wait a minute, what is this? But yeah, some moments on here. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, the Joan Baez cover. Confused is a fantastic track. Communication Breakdown. That was kind of their Ain't Talking About Love, to sort of make that Van Halen comparison. But I love this album to death. It was, I think, one of the first Led Zeppelin albums I ever owned. And I've still got such a fond, attachment to that album.
And what's great about that record too, like looking at the track listing, and you were talking about it a little bit, it's sort of Led Zeppelin showed you all of their different styles on that album, on their first album. They showed you that they're going to do blues, they're going to do hard rock, they're going to do, folky sort of, I don't know how you would categorize the song Black Mountainside. It's sort of folky, it's sort of, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but even like Dazed and Confused, it sort of reminds me of like it's a little psychedelic in parts, and so they sort of touched on all their different musical styles just on that first album.
Yeah, with the Black Mountainside, you got like that tabla. It's not the only on there is like that Indian tabla, which is a unique kind of texture for them to use. But yeah, it's a great album.
Mm-hmm. Good choice.
Yeah.
Okay,
it
Gary.
Might show up. It might show up again. Okay, what are we on for?
Yeah.
Yep. So this is, one of the ones we talked about beforehand. Maybe not wanting to show the ones everybody's going to think of, but I can't help but put this on here. Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? This is a debut album, and it's like a goddamn greatest hits. I mean, you look at all the songs, including Hey Joe is on here, but Purple Haze, Manic Depression, Wind Cries Mary, I Don't Live Today. I love that song. I Don't Live Today, and Jimmy's got those voiceovers that he does, and there's all these crazy things that are on this album to go along with the amazing guitar playing. I mean, I'm the oldest of this group, but obviously I don't remember when this came out because I was probably like in diapers or something. But I can only imagine what it must have been like, for like if you were like 15 or 16 and all of a sudden this album came out, you're a rock and roll fan and you've been listening to the Stones and the Beatles, whatever. And all of a sudden you hear this thing and you're like, oh my God, who is this? And where, what planet did he come from? This album, I mean, you listen to it today and it is still so trippy. It is such an amazing, and, Jimi Hendrix, even though he didn't like his own voice, that's part of what's great about this album is his voice. He's got that heavy blues voice that he's singing these rock songs with. And it doesn't matter what he says. It just sounds like he means it, and you're like, whatever he said, you believe it. He can say whatever crazy ass shit he says on this record. And it's like, yeah, man, that is cool. That's the thing about Jimi Hendrix, man. He was like the coolest guy in the 1960s, and to think the way he took the blues guitar and just amped it up. You were talking about Iron Butterfly and how they affected heavy metal. Jimi Hendrix obviously affected heavy metal and every other guitar player that ever came after it.
Well, you got to think too. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Not just him.
No, I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, along with heavy metal, like I'm just thinking of Jimi Hendrix's stage show, like lighting his freaking guitar on fire. Like, Ace Frehley had to have been influenced by him.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah. And he's also got Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding in the band, and you can't really understate those guys. Mitch Mitchell is basically kind of like more like a jazz drummer, really, and he's because he's just all over the place. So you had Noel Redding, who was a rhythm guitar player. He wasn't a bass player, but Jimi Hendrix liked the way his hair looked. And he said, no, we'll use you. You play bass in the band. So, the bass lines are very simple, but it has to be, right? Because you got Mitch Mitchell all over the place, and you got Jimi Hendrix. You don't know what he's going to do. So somebody's got to hold that down. And that was Noel Redding. And I almost didn't want to use this album, but I could not use this. You know what I mean? I had to use it because it's just too amazing of a record. And I love it today. I listened to it the other night and I'm like, yeah, this album is great. This is just fantastic. So number 4.
One of my favorite songs on there is Manic Depression. And I would love to know the time signature of that song, because I don't think it's a straight time signature for that. It's sort of got this strange rhythm to it. It's a cool song though.
It almost has almost like a waltz kind of thing going through it, But
it's like a little bit of a give and take on it. It's just a cool song, and that's the second track on the fucking record.
Yeah, that's I just that's one of those things, man. I would have loved to been able to just, who's Jimi Hendrix? Never heard of him. Oh, well, let's put this record on. You'd have been like, boom,
Well, let me tell you,
that's the definitive version of Hey Joe.
Oh yeah.
I remember the first time I heard Jimi Hendrix because my father rented a movie. I was very young, and there was a trailer, used to show commercials like coming soon. And in the commercial, they only played a little snippet of Purple Haze, that amazing guitar tone of Jimi Hendrix. And as soon as the trailer was over, I said, Dad, stop. He's like, what? I was like, what was that song? He's like, that's Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze. I'm like, I need that song. And he's like, well, go over the records and find Jimi Hendrix. And I remember finding the Jimi Hendrix records and waiting to the end of the movie to go listen to them, because it was just that guitar tone. And my father used to have conversations with me as soon as Clapton hit a note, you could tell it was Clapton. As soon as Hendrix hit a note, as soon as Eddie Van Halen hit a note, it's like some people have such distinct tone and sound that it's them. And and I can always remember sitting on my floor, because we used to sit on the floor, the kids sat on the floor, the adults got the couch, and watch a movie. But I always remember making my dad hit pause so I could be like, who is that? I need to listen to Jimi Hendrix. It's incredible.
That's a cool story.
All right. So number 4, I'm going to go with an underrated album from 1963. It's by Jack White called Listen, Son. No, I'm kidding. It actually did come out in 1963. No, I'm going with The Doors debut. 1967. I love The Doors. I mean, they don't have a bad, I was going to say they don't have a bad record, but when Jim Morrison left, they came out with a couple records that were okay. The music was good, but the vocals were not. They needed Jim Morrison on vocals. I mean, this is just, Gary was talking about Hendrix' first record being a greatest hits. This is sort of like a greatest hits too. I mean, you've got Break On Through to the Other Side, Soul Kitchen, The Crystal Ship, Light My Fire, and then, my favorite song, The End, which just an amazing journey, 11 minutes of Jim Morrison just being Jim Morrison. In high school, I read Jim Morrison's poetry because he came out with a few books of his poetry, and it's just wild stuff. I don't even know what the hell he's talking about, but he was such a cool dude. And there was the Doors were mysterious. They were sort of edgy. You didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And it was all Jim Morrison. You didn't know what he was going to do next, and you didn't know where the song was going to go. And I don't know, it just made them really cool. And I want to say they got their name from, it was maybe Jim Morrison's idea of opening the doors of your mind.
I think it was Aldous Huxley.
Yeah.
What? Aldous Huxley?
I have no idea, but
yeah, he had a book I think called The Doors of Perception or something.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it was sort of like Jim Morrison. I mean, I know he was out there on drugs and everything, but I almost feel like he was trying to just expand everybody's mind about what music could do. And John Densmore on drums he does some cool little jazz.
Yeah, he does.
Jazz flourishes, sort of Middle Eastern kind of style to his drumming. I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but I don't know. They were just a cool band that was sort of like introducing everybody to this new style of music and what it could do. And, you know, I mean, I still listen to the Doors now and I go, holy shit. Like, they were just a great band.
They're very, very unique. Very, like everything you just said, I agree with. Very mysterious, powerful.
Yeah.
You know, and on the debut album, I love the fact that they did, you know, Backdoor Man by Howlin' Wolf. And they didn't just say, I mean, you know, a few other artists had covered Howlin' Wolf, you know, like the Stones did Little Red Rooster or whatever. But it's like they went at that song. I mean, that's a Howlin' Wolf song, man. You don't just fuck around if you're going to cover Howlin' Wolf. And they took that song and bam, they went at it. You know, I mean, I can't picture anybody else doing that version like they did, to where you're like, you know, probably a lot of people didn't even realize that it was somebody else's song. But, you know, and I don't want to say they necessarily made it, you know, their own, because I love the Howlin' Wolf version, but they did a fantastic version of that. And the way they did, it's like, you got to have balls like this to take that song and just go for it like they did. And that's what the Doors did, whatever they wanted to do.
And it was all about Jim It was all about Jim Morrison. And I think the guys in the band, they liked the fact that they didn't know what Jim was going to do next, because that sort of added that like danger to their shows. And I mean, talk about a front man. I mean, Jim Morrison, he gets up there, he's got the tight leather pants, he's fucking just dancing around, and the girls are like going crazy. He's got the long hair, this mysterious look, like he just had this mystique to him. And I don't know, bands come along sometimes and it's almost like they blow people's minds. The Doors were one of those bands.
I agree.
Oh.
I wear leather pants now when people laugh. I mean, but...
Are you wearing them right now?
Well, I was going to say, Bob Dylan's song is my theme song, Ballad of a Thin Man.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Anyway.
Well,
nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a fantastic, fantastic album. You know, I remember hearing Break On Through for the first time, and, you know, that opening line, you know, the day destroys the night divides the day, right? It's just so fantastic. And then, you know, just the aggression, you know, try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. You know, there was aggression to it with still being 60s music. I don't think, I agree with you, Chris, that they probably, all of this music influenced metal, right? For those of us that are metalheads, there's no way it didn't influence. There was darkness to the Doors albums. I get it that a lot of people, you know, grow tired of the Doors because it's overplayed. But if you sit down and you listen to just the music without Jim Morrison, and like you said, the jazz flourishes, the especially if you have a analog pressing, you can really hear the separation of the instruments and just that flow. But, you know, this album and LA Woman are probably two of my favorite albums of all time. Morrison Hotel is probably my third favorite by them, but this is up there, and it's a great album. And I could actually, at any point, this could be my number one of the 60s. But yeah, fantastic album. Great choice, Chris.
Yeah, and dude, anybody who's saying they're tired of the Doors because they're overplayed, like, seriously, go listen to the Soft Parade or freaking, you know,
listen to, there's a lot of songs
Waiting
that
for
are
the
never
Sun.
played on the radio, you know, and go listen to those songs.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so yeah, we hear Break On Through and, you know, Light My Fire a lot, but I mean, the Doors were so much more than those two songs.
Right. And like
Soul
you said,
Kitchen.
Soul Kitchen. I love Alabama Song. Like, there's so many songs by them I love, you know. Yeah, it's killer.
Take me to the next whiskey.
You know what's
bar.
funny? My old boss used to get on like the PA. This is like when I used to work at a department store. And before the store would open, he'd be like, I woke up this morning and I got myself a beer. And I'm like, we kind of believe that.
Yeah, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, this is the end. My only friend, the end. I like to start my days on a positive note. The end of laughter and soft lies. Sorry.
Now, when I was younger, it was the wake up this morning, get myself a beer. Now it's where Chris is at.
Either that or I put this on in the morning.
Listen, son.
And that just gets me in a real positive mode.
Next.
Aaron.
Well, sticking with the metalish theme that we're going with here, this is a Dave 1968, and really great album. This is Vincebus Reptum by Blue Cheer, and this
just said rectum.
Well, it's a Dave
Reptum.
That's what I heard.
This is a very good record. It's only got 6 songs, and one of my records only has a few songs that I have here. But this is actually where the term power trio, they kind of got that from this band, and it's in your face, and it's very Hendrix-esque in times, the guitar work and everything. And it's they were doing a lot of drugs when they did this, and their version of Summertime Blues on this, it actually it hit number 11 on the charts, but it's very aggressive and very good. Probably the best version of that song ever made. But this whole album is great. Parchment Farm is amazing on here. Dr. Please, I guess they wrote that as it was kind of a promoting drugs in a way. They were just talking about all the drug use, but it's an amazing record.
Drugs.
Yeah. But that added to the music, I think, and it's very Hendrix-esque, this record, and it's very influential in metal. It's considered one of the first metal records, proto metal, whatever. So
I agree.
Yeah, it's knock out Blackie Lawless on it, but it's close.
And in all seriousness, though, Aaron, that is a heavy freaking record.
Oh yeah,
It is.
It's one of those records you put on and it sounds like it's just coming apart at the seams. Like it's a pretty heavy record, and it's killer. I love it.
It's amazing.
MTV, you know how like when MTV started out, they used to have like all those real old videos they would show too, and from like I don't know what show they were getting them from, but they had that Summertime Blues, Blue Cheer doing it, and the guitar was like so distorted. Just so cranked, man. It was really cool. Now, what's the name of the album again?
Vincebus Reptum. I have no idea what it means. There, you can look there.
I think it's Latin or I ate too much Indian food.
I think they were on a lot of drugs, is what it was. It's very drug-addled.
So,
shit.
So I just have a question for the Rush fans. Remember Rush made that EP like early 2000s called I forget. They covered all their favorite 60s songs. Didn't they cover Summertime, whatever? What's the song Blue Cheer does on there?
Summertime Blues, Rock Me Baby.
Yeah, I think Rush covered Summertime Blues too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, of course, The Who did that also.
Yeah. Yep. This version here is just so distorted, though. It's great.
Yeah.
It's kind of known as the most definitive version of that song, even though it wasn't theirs.
And like you said, that does, anytime you're reading like the history of heavy metal, that's one of the albums that gets thrown in there too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very strange. I love this record though.
Blow out your rectum.
This is probably one of our best videos.
All right. Well, we've already covered the Doors on this round, but I'm going to continue the Doors love here. But I didn't go with the debut album. I went with their second album. Which is a great album. I love the debut. I could have very easily gone with the debut, but I knew somebody was going to pick it, and I thought, well, I like this one a lot as well. Maybe not as strong as the debut, but still, like, these songs were all around. I mean, this was released in, I think, like October or November of 1967. So same year. If you listen to those early Doors concert recordings or their performances, a lot of the same material that they were recording or had around at the time that they recorded their debut album, the leftovers kind of ended up on here. But this is great. I love Strange Days, how Jim Morrison's voice has got some sort of like weird vibrato or echo on it. You're a Lost Little Girl, which Jim Morrison had written for Frank Sinatra. Love
that.
Times, People Are Strange, When the Music's Over, Moonlight Drive.
Yes.
Moments on it. It's a fantastic album, and I love the artwork too. I love the cover artwork on here. It's one
awesome.
Of the bizarre. Every other Doors album has a picture of the band, but this is the only one where they picked kind of a weird imagery for. So I love it for that reason alone. But
that's not
what's that?
That's not Jim Morrison there on the cover?
No. Sure, they're technically on the back cover, the poster of the Doors here, but
dude, Moonlight Drive is one of my favorite Doors songs. It's so fantastic.
It's beautiful. I love that song. That was like the first thing they ever wrote, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
And
that was like a poem.
Yeah. Just to show you how much balls the Doors had, that song Horse Latitudes.
Yeah.
And that's freaking Jim Morrison reciting some crazy ass poetry. Like,
while there's all these noises in the background going on.
Yeah, who puts that on a record? And it's, I mean, I don't know, but that was the Doors. That was what was cool about them.
Yeah, the Moody Blues had some poetry on their, Days of Future Past album, which...
Yeah, but nothing like Jim Morrison.
Around the same time. No, it was not like Jim Morrison's poetry, but that's just a crazy, and like the end, just how it all... It's kind of a frightening song.
It is.
Call it a song, but...
Actually, Strange Days is probably just as strong as the debut album, really. I mean, when you think about it and all those songs you just listed, I love that. I just love that, when he says strange days have found us, there's just something about that line right there that, and you think of the turbulent times that they were going through and just that weird, like almost space music, going on in the background. It's like, that song is just so perfect. They have that. And then they have a song called People Are Strange, which is also a very odd song and has a sense of menace to it. And that's, that's what you touched on, Chris, that the Doors had this sense of menace to them all the time, all throughout their career. Even though they had like a few fluffy kind of songs, there was always a little bit of danger involved in that band. And that just made them great because they were unpredictable.
That was from Obsession with Jack Pyle, I think.
I think so.
Well, and we always talk about how music changes, but what year did the Beatles' I Want to Hold Your Hand come out?
64. Well, 64.
So 64, 3 years later, just 3 years later, you have Jim Morrison singing The End and Light My Fire. Like, that is a huge shift from I Want to Hold Your Hand. I know they're two different bands, but my point is that subject matter changed. What was acceptable changed in like 3 years.
Yeah, well, even Beatles lyrics, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Love Me Do, to Turn Off Your Mind, Relax, and Float Downstream.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, so I don't know. It's like that was a quick change. It was almost like, hey, we want to say this stuff, but we can't. But now we can. I don't know. It just sort of happened really fast.
But you know what I love about it is like the Beatles, to have a song like Blackbird, which I think is one of the most beautiful songs, just the chord progression, the lyrics, the vocals, and then Helter Skelter, like polar opposites on a same album. And to have Light My Fire, which is kind of a poppy song to the end, the bands at that point were experimenting on albums. They were having poppy songs, or at the same time having very experimental songs.
Yeah.
You know, if that makes any sense. But
yeah, no, definitely.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
All right, number 3, Gary.
All right, number 3. I could not do a best of the 60s without this band. And that is CCR with Green River. And the crazy thing, this is the second of 3 albums that they put out in 1969. I mean, how insane is that?
They came out with 3 albums in 1969?
Yeah.
Yes. I saw John Fogerty in concert in 2019, I think it was, and he was celebrating that. The tour was called 1969. He was celebrating the fact that they had 3 albums out that year, and it's just like, and they're all great. You know, this album to me,
and the Poor Boys and Cosmos Factory.
Yep.
No, Cosmos Factory came out in 70. It was Willie and the Poor Boys and what is it?
Bayou Country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But whatever, they're all great. I mean, that's the thing. And it's just, this album starts out with such a great 1-2 punch with Green River and Commotion. When I was a little kid, I found my sister had some 45s. She had got married and moved out, and I found these 45s in the attic. And, that was when I started out, getting into rock and roll. And so like CCR to me was like some really old band, not thinking. And she had that 45 and it had Green River on one side and Commotion on the other. And I remember playing that and I'm like, man, this Commotion song rocks, man. This is really something. Who is this band? And, of course, it took a while before I ever finally got into them after that. But there's nothing, I know I already used the term before with Hendrix, but once again, to me, this is another perfect album. It could be a greatest hits. I know it's got a few songs that maybe aren't as well known, like Tombstone Shadow and Cross Tie Walker, Sinister Purpose, but those are all great songs. But the hits, it's got Bad Moon Rising on here, which has those little, every time they say the line, they got the little guitar ditty after that, like sounds like Scotty Moore from Elvis Presley's band. You could just tell, the inspiration there, who was inspiring John Fogerty. The song Lodi, I feel like Aaron and Chris, you guys are musicians. That whole song, just the, if I only had $1 for every song I sung, and every time I had to play while people sat there drunk, that's a band playing anywhere, trying to make it, you get stuck in Lodi. There's a Lodi in every state. Every state has a town called Lodi. So, it's everywhere USA. There's just, this song is, it's America. Everything about it is just so awesome. And John Fogerty is a genius in my mind in his songwriting, and the fact that this band could put out 3 albums in 1 year, and this is one of them. It just amazes me. It blows my mind every time I think of this. And the song, he's got a beautiful song on here called "Wrote a Song for Everyone." Basically saying, hey, I write all these songs that everybody relates to and everything, but I can't even communicate with my wife. I could talk to these millions of people and sell records and write songs for them, but I can't even communicate with the person I love the most. And his marriage was having issues, and that's just genius writing right there. So that's my number 3 pick, Green River, CCR.
And I think you're right too. You used the term American. It's American. That their sound, that how they incorporated all different styles of American music and then they sort of filtered it through the CCR thing, and it's like, I mean, they came up with their own unique sound, but still, it's American. That's what's great about that band.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You know, they always have this sound like you think they come from the South, like from Louisiana somewhere, but they're all from California.
Yeah.
You know, but they got this swamp rock kind of sound going.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
Funny, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Swamp rock. Yeah.
Swamp rock. Yep.
Is it my turn?
Yep.
All right. Well, number 3, from 1968, I had to put an album from this band, and you know, I guess maybe the safe choice would have been Sgt. Pepper's, and I really like this record. I mean, it's been talked about so much how influential it was, and I really like it, but I got to go with the White Album from 1968. And, you know, I'm not going to talk too much about this. We all know how great of an album this is. But the one thing I'm going to say, I like this is that it's so diverse. I mean, you've got almost every different style of music on this. You know, you've got folk music, and you've got psychedelic, you've got blues, you know, you've got rock, you've got heavy metal with Helter Skelter. You've got comedic songs. I love how they had the guts to put like Revolution 9 on here, you know, and I love also how they end the album with a song, Good Night. I mean, it's just sort of like it's sort of a nice way. It almost gives it a sort of a, not a theme, concept. It's not a concept record. But when you've got a song like Good Night at the end, it sort of gives it sort of a concept vibe. And I just love everything about this album. I mean, I think it was everything that's great about the Beatles on an album. So it's probably my favorite Beatles record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great one.
Crickets. I hear crickets.
No, you're right. It has everything on it. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I love that album. I was waiting for Jeff to speak because he's the Beatle expert, and well, I guess Aaron probably close second, right?
No, that's my all-time favorite album, Beatles album. Yeah,
is it? I mean, I love the deep tracks on here, like "Sexy Sadie" and "Mother Nature's Son." What's that other one? Oh, "Savoy Truffle." I love "Savoy Truffle."
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know. I don't think there's ever been an album like this again. I mean, I know I said that Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness was the 90s version of the White Album, but, you know, it's not. But I don't think there was another album like this that ever came out.
Plus, it had all the Paul is dead clues, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
On the album.
Well, you got 30 tracks on there, and even the throwaway stuff, like "Why Don't We Do It on the Road" is fantastic. You know, I wouldn't get rid of this track on there. Even "Wild Honey Pie" I think is charming.
And I mean,
everybody's got something to hide,
except for Me and My Monkey. I mean, that's a great freaking title.
Mm-hmm.
I might talk about that in a minute.
Julia has got to be one of the prettiest songs.
Yeah.
Aaron says, "Shut up."
Yeah.
And then, like, so listen to this crap here. Like, not crap, but it's craziness. You take Blackbird, which JC was saying is one of the prettiest melodies. You know the song that follows Blackbird? Piggies. It's like, I don't know. It's just, that's what made the Beatles great.
Yeah, they grouped all the animal songs on side 2. You know, you got Blackbird, then Piggies, then Rocky Raccoon. But yeah.
Yeah. Continuing story, Bungalow Bill. Talk about, you know, a lot of animals in that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They wrote
Cry Baby Cry.
They wrote the majority of this stuff when they were in India or wherever they were with the
with the Maharishi.
Yeah. I couldn't think how to say the word.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the other thing is too, when you say the White Album, I mean, people know what you're talking about. They might not even be a Beatles fan, but they know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it was never intended to be called the White Album, but it just, that name just stuck, because what else are you going to call it? It was really just called the Beatles, but because white people, you know, called it the White Album, and it's stuck ever since.
And what was the meaning behind a self-titled record? Is it sort of like a rebirth of some sort, or?
Yeah, well, I think they had thrown around a couple of different names. They were going to call it A Doll's House, which was from a Henry Ibsen novel, I think. And they just, I don't know, they just went with the Beatles because it was kind of, like you say, representative of all the different facets of the Beatles.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, well,
amazing.
My next record was recorded in one day, December 9th, 1964. The artist went in, and it's essentially done in 4 parts, but there's only 3 tracks. Side 1 has 2 tracks, and then side 2 has 1 track, but there's 2 parts to it. And it was intended as kind of a love letter to God, and it's called The Love Supreme by John Coltrane. I know this is not for Aaron. This is for everyone but Aaron, because we don't want Aaron aggravated. But it's an absolutely breathtaking, beautiful album. McCoy Tyner plays piano on it, but John Coltrane is a saxophone player. And it's just a beautiful album. I'm not a religious person, but it's you can understand the passion that this man was playing with this album. And it's obviously considered to be one of the greatest jazz albums of all time. It is surprisingly not my favorite jazz album of all time. My favorites tend to be from the 50s or the 70s. So the 60s was not my favorite time period for jazz, but this was my favorite jazz album from the 1960s. But yeah, it's just a great album. So everybody should, besides Aaron, go listen to it.
Well, he only had 3 years to live. He died in 1967. So, you know, he was playing on borrowed time, and he had cancer and, you know, passed away. He's very tragically so young. You know, one of those artists, you think, God, if he would have lived, how, you know, transformative would his music have been in the late 60s, 70s, and beyond.
Right. Yeah, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I do like a little jazz. I like some fusion, and I love Ace Frehley's Trouble Walking.
I love
that's a great
Trouble.
That's a great jazz record.
Well, that's what, jazz, man, says it right in it.
Yeah.
That is a
JC, that's a phenomenal record.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you anybody's out there, they just repressed this in 2020, and it's put out by Acoustic Sounds. They're doing like an Impulse, and so it's relatively cheap, and it's an all analog copy. It sounds tremendous. So if you want it, now's the time to go buy it. Just make sure you buy the one from Acoustic Sounds.
If I saw it, I'd probably buy it just to hear it on on my new record player and see if I liked it better.
Blow your mind.
Record, I can't say I don't like all jazz because I haven't heard a lot. So just the stuff I have, or maybe I'm hearing the wrong jazz records is all. So
it'll hit you one of these days, Aaron.
Well, it's been 50 years and it hasn't hit me yet. So
well, it's definitely not for everybody. You just like heavy metal isn't for everybody, you know.
Exactly. There's people that hate metal and I love it, so I understand.
Yeah, there are people who hate Kyle too.
So I got a jazz record next. I'm up, right? And I'm in number 3.
Yep.
So this is a super group that came from a super group, kind of. One of my favorite records of the 60s, Blind Faith. And of course, it's Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker from Cream, Steve Winwood, and Rick Gretsch. And this album is, only got, 6 songs, just like Blue Cheer. But they only had this one record, and it's totally amazing. Can't Find My Way Home was the big hit, but every song on it's great. Presence of the Lord, I even like that. It's just a great song, Sea of Joy. But my favorite thing on here, I always talk about it, is Do What You Like. And Ginger Baker's drum solo on that, I think that's influenced a lot of heavy metal drummers. He starts hitting some double bass at the end of it, and it's really killer. So one of my favorite drum solos ever on this record. And it's an epic song, 15 minutes long. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with this. You probably are. But, had to cry.
Band.
Great or two. It's one of the best supergroups ever. It's too bad they didn't put out another album.
They really dislike each other.
Huh?
Didn't they really dislike each other though?
Well, it's that they had a hard time touring because they didn't have a lot of material, and they had to throw in a bunch of their other band stuff, and they got tired and they didn't really want to do that. And so it kind of put them at odds because they weren't wanting to play those songs, the Traffic songs, the Cream songs, and they had to basically live just to fill a set out. And it just they kind of drip, they weren't a real tight band together personally, I guess, because of that.
Yeah.
It's just such an amazing record. And I do prefer this cover to the other one, of course. And I like how they put the lyrics on the back. Mm-hmm. Really killer. But just do what you like. Every time I hear it, it blows my mind, the drum solo on that.
Yeah.
This is one of the best ever. And Ginger Baker was amazing.
Why did they, because the first cover, if I remember right, is highly offensive, right? Isn't it like the young child? What were they thinking? Like, I don't understand what was going through their head.
They were on drugs, who knows?
Yeah.
Just the whole innocence and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but JC, all I'm going to say is this: Scorpions' Virgin Killer.
Yeah, that's the worst cover of all time. I would never own that record. Not with that cover. Yeah, I just... Yeah. Album cover, that is. Not the music's good. The album cover is highly offensive.
Well, you could put some little black bars over it,
Yeah, something.
Yeah, but I just love this record, though.
It's a good record.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going to go with an album by this band. And, the easy pick would have been to go with their double album from 1969. But I've always had a soft spot for this album from 1967, one of my favorite bands of all time. I am talking about The Who. The Who Sell Out. Just great album. So many of my favorite Who moments are on here. And I love... Maybe my favorite track on here, strangely enough, is Odorono. I just love the play on there. It's got a funny lyric, but you've also got I Can See for Miles, I Can't See You, Marianne with the Shaky Hand is on here. And all the songs flow together. And if you've never heard this album before, they tried to mimic like a pirate radio station broadcast. And so you've got the Who performing commercials in between the songs, and just kind of having fun with it. And it's a great record. Pete Townsend had mostly been known for his singles work up to this point. You had, My Generation, and then a quick one, which, had some filler on it, some moments that were not all that strong. But, this is, I think, the first really solid Who album. It's a great one. Could have gone with Tommy, almost did, but I thought that was kind of too much of a safe pick. But I've always loved this album. It's fantastic. This year it got an anniversary pressing, which is weird because if anything, you thought they would have done a 50th anniversary of Who's Next, but instead they've done a deluxe version of this album, which I do not have. But way overdue giving this deluxe anniversary pressing.
I love The Who. I saw them in concert. They're fantastic. But the strange thing about The Who for me is my favorite song from them is probably no one else in the world's favorite song. And it's that Eminence Front song. I don't know why. Whenever that song comes on, I'm like, I love this song. And
that's a great song.
I love The Who. But that song just kills me every time. I've never gotten sick of it. I just love it.
Great song.
By them. I like that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, too. Okay, up to number 2. This is not my pick, but this makes me think of the 60s.
Yes. I love that band, to be honest with you. I love surf rock.
I do too.
Yeah, me too. So my number 2 pick, and I kind of changed this going by a little conversation there right before we went on air. This is not what I was going to pick, but I am going with Aftermath by the Rolling Stones. I realize this isn't like their most top rated or notorious album of the 60s, but I think it's a great turning point for the band. This actually came out, it came out before Pet Sounds. It came out before Revolver. And this is the Rolling Stones changing on this album. This is the first album where they wrote every song on here. You still had an active Brian Jones in the band. So he's adding, basically color to these songs. And I love this album. I can listen to this. I love early Stones, and this is the best one of that time period. They've got the blues songs on here, but it's their own version of them now. And they've got songs like Going Home, which is this like really long song, and it's just really odd. It like the instruments slowly drop out as the song goes further along, and it gets to a point where it's almost just Mick Jagger going, making noises and talking a little bit, and I love it. I love the sound of this. Of course, it has Under My Thumb, and it also has Paint It Black, which in my mind is just easily one of the best songs of the 1960s. I love that song. I can hear that today, and I still crank it up. This is some of this on here is when the Stones kind of started a little bit more of their darker image, that they would just keep escalating. I mean, they, after this, they venture into a little bit of flower power kind of thing, but that was never that. I mean, they totally destroy it by the time they get to Let It Bleed. But, they start some of the darker things we think of the Stones, on this album. And to me, I can listen to this one start to finish. I don't skip anything on it. I love it. Number 2, Aftermath, Rolling Stones, 1966.
I have to show something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wow.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I just have to,
That, and you know what? That song is, like I said, it's a dark song, and just Paint It Black. That definitely has like a, lyrically, a kind of a heavy metal feel to it. I mean, it sounds like hell. It almost sounds like something that Black Sabbath could have done on their first album. Change it a little bit.
With our Wasp thing we had going, I just had to because it was on there. So
it makes sense, Aaron.
All right. Well, my number 2 is going to be probably an album that a lot of people either don't know or they don't like. It's actually an album that one of you guys gave to me. And this album came out in 1969. And it's Pink Floyd More. And Jeff actually gave me this copy. And this is on the famous Harvest label. This has just always been one of my favorite Pink Floyd records. Jeff, I was just showing the album that you gave me. And anybody who watches my channel, I've talked about this album quite a bit. It's definitely not a favorite amongst Pink Floyd fans, and a lot of Pink Floyd fans don't probably even know this record. It's a soundtrack to a movie called More. I've never seen the movie before. But again, I've talked about albums that sort of take you on a journey. This one does. I mean, you've got some great psychedelic folk type stuff, like with the song Cirrus Minor. There's a beautiful song in here called Green is the Color by Roger Waters. That's amazing. And then there's a song in here called the Nile Song, which we keep talking about heavy metal. The Nile Song is a heavy metal song. And I'm telling you, if anybody's into the band Voivod covered the song, the Nile Song. I believe it's on their album, The Outer Limits. There's some crazy messed up like psychedelic instrumental stuff on here. And it's just all over the place, but I just love the vibe of the record. I really want to see the movie at some point, but again, it's one of those albums that a lot of people don't know, or maybe don't understand, or just don't like. It's just always been an album that's connected with me, though.
What year was that?
69.
Wow.
I believe they have that at my record store right now. I ain't gonna go buy that.
Yeah. The crying song reminds me a little bit of Breathe on Dark Side of the Moon. So you don't see some elements of, you know, what Pink Floyd would eventually develop into.
Yeah, I think this was the last sort of album that sort of incorporated some of that psychedelic stuff before they started to streamline their sound. I love all eras of Pink Floyd. I really go back to this album. I love Obscured by Clouds as well. And this has just always been a favorite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Nice choice.
Thank you.
So Jeff showed earlier Bob Dylan, and I love singer-songwriters. I love Bob Dylan. Being a Springsteen fan, you can see the influence that Bob Dylan had on him. And this is one of my favorite Bob Dylan albums, The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. It's got Blowin' in the Wind, which is one of his biggest hits, Girl from North County, which is one of my favorites, Master of War, which could be my favorite Bob Dylan song, Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, but probably my all-time favorite Bob Dylan song is Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. I love about that song, I just love the brutal lyrics. You know, me and my brother used to say, let's talk about brutal lyrics, and not brutal like Cannibal Corpse, like brutal like, could you imagine someone saying this to you? And two of the most brutal lyrics, one was by Bob Dylan, which was, and Don't Think Twice, when he says, I'm not saying you treated me unkind. I could have done better, but I don't mind. You just kind of wasted my precious time. Like, you know, like, imagine someone saying that to you, like, you just wasted my time. Like, you're nothing, you know, don't think twice. It's all right. The only one that we thought was more brutal was when Axl Rose said, when I come home late at night, don't ask me where I've been, just count your stars, I'm home again. Well, like, yeah, that's pretty brutal right there. But Bob Dylan is just absolutely amazing, and this album is amazing. I could have gone with Jeff's pick, obviously, but this era of Dylan is just fantastic. So, yeah.
I love Corinna on there.
Yeah.
And later on, didn't Johnny Cash and Dylan do Girl from the North Country together?
Yeah, so Bob Dylan was a huge Johnny Cash fan. And believe it or not, Bob Dylan never really wanted to be a superstar. I've watched so many documentaries on him. You know, in the sense that, like, you know, political star, I should say, like, have these political songs. He wanted to be more like of a rock star, you know, or like a Johnny Cash. And they both admire each other so much. And there's a bootleg series that has a ton of songs that Bob Dylan did with Johnny Cash.
Wow.
Yeah, so go get that bootleg series. It's incredible.
It's funny that you mentioned Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, because I just learned how to play that on guitar, and I love that song.
All right.
Yeah, I think
yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Oh, now I need that. What's Traveling Through it's called?
It's called Traveling Through, yep.
Sweet. Is it on vinyl too, or just CD?
Yeah, it's on vinyl. And it's not that expensive. You can get it on Amazon.
Cool. Look it up.
And didn't Johnny Cash borrow the melody of Don't Think Twice Is All Right for Understand Your Man?
I think so, yeah. It's very similar, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
that's a great song.
I read the Johnny Cash autobiography also, and, you know, when Bob Dylan reached out to him, like, he was so excited. And, like, him telling June, you know, like, oh, you don't understand. This man is like a genius, you know. And Bob Dylan felt the same way about Johnny Cash, just so fantastic, their admiration for each other. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I came so close to putting Folsom Prison by Johnny Cash on this list. I can't believe, now that I'm thinking of it, I can't believe I didn't, because that's got to be one of my favorite 60s albums.
Well, I want to talk about Johnny Cash for a second, too, because I didn't put any Johnny Cash on mine, but I think the reason is because I prefer 70s Johnny Cash, because my favorite Johnny Cash album is Hello, I'm Johnny Cash, but that's 1970.
Yeah.
And I feel like that from then on, like, his albums, I mean, I love the 60s stuff, too, but for whatever reason, I like the 70s stuff better.
Yeah. I like it all.
I like it all, too, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
All right, Aaron.
All right. My next one is the third album by one of my favorite artists, and it's this one here, Aerial Ballet from Nilsson. Love this record. And the strange thing about this, originally, the first song on this was going to be a song called Daddy's Home. And the Monkees had just recorded that for their movie Head, and they owned exclusive rights to it. So without Harry Nilsson's knowledge, it was removed from the record before it came out. And so an odd deal that his own song was removed because the Monkees had the rights to it. But this does have the song One, which Three Dog Night made into a huge hit. One is the loneliest number. And Everybody's Talking, which I believe was his biggest hit he ever had, which is strangely the only cover on here. But, it's got, I just love this record. Good Old Desk, how this starts is just so great. You can find copies with Daddy's Home, but they've reissued it like that. Put it back on. The Monkees lost the rights to it. And yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. And this here, the Nilsson Aerial Ballet, is actually where Aerosmith kind of got their name from. Joey Kramer said that they got the name Aerosmith kind of from this record and using the Wings from this record here from Nilsson. So that's kind of an odd tie into hard rock.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a great record too. Even weird. I mean, he's got such a weird taste. His songs are all over. He's got like these weird songs like Bath and Little Cowboy, but it's just he's such a great storyteller. I love his voice. And this is my favorite album he did from the 60s. Really great album here, Aerial Ballet.
That's a good album.
All right, well, my number 2 pick, and this is a band I've gone on record as saying my favorite album of theirs is the one from 1969, which followed this album. But again, I'm not trying to go with the safe pick, but I think I like this album just as much, actually, as I listen to it again, as I go through all the tracks. And I'm talking also about the Rolling Stones, but I'm going to go with Beggar's Banquet from 1968. This has Sympathy for the Devil, one of the greatest tracks Rolling Stones ever recorded. Also, Street Fighting Man is on here. And it's really kind of a return to form. The Rolling Stones had lost the plot a little bit. After Aftermath, they had recorded Between the Buttons, which has kind of got a little, it's sort of like a British dance hall sort of, it's just got some real distinctly British tracks on there. And then they went full on psychedelic with their Satanic Majesty's Request album, which people thought, okay, like you're totally off in the wrong direction. You've no business recording. Although I like that album, but definitely at the time it was sort of like, well, you're just copying the Beatles. And so they really went back to their blues roots on here, even though, Brian Jones's contribution is somewhat negligible because he was really into drugs pretty heavily at this point. But you got No Expectations, Parachute Woman, Factory Girl, String Cat Blues, which is just a gritty, dirty Rolling Stones track, one of their most rated tracks from this period. Jigsaw Puzzle, which is great, has a lot of kind of Bob Dylan imagery in it. But yeah, I love this album. I think it's fantastic and one of the best. If they made this double album, it could have competed easily with the White Album. But still, I think it's just a fantastic Rolling Stones album.
I almost picked it. Now, what's the deal with the different covers?
Yeah, they wanted that bathroom cover, but the record company, they fought with the record company over it. And eventually they acquiesced and said, fine, you won't let us use a cover. They just picked like the blandest cover, which is sort of looks like a invitation. They've got RSVP here on the cover. And people said, oh, now you're really copying the Beatles. You copied the Beatles. You use the same Satanic Majesty's Request as the Beatles used for Sgt. Pepper. And then the Beatles come out with the White Album. And what do the Rolling Stones do? They come out with a stark White Album cover too. But it was not the Rolling Stones' choice. It was sort of like at the last minute, like, okay, you're not going to let us in. It's so funny because what is so offensive about that album cover when you think about, albums that have come even before or since, but whatever, Decca Records said, no way you are putting that on your album cover. And in fact, that delayed the release of this album. I think this album came out in like December of 1968, and it really could have been released months earlier, but they were fighting with the record company about the album cover. So
obviously later pressings, they put this as the cover.
Yeah. Like when they reissued it on CD was the first time that you could actually get that cover. And then I've got a 180 gram remastered version of it that has the bathroom cover also.
Okay.
That's
still off the cover and the bathroom one's under it.
Yeah,
I don't think they did.
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite like that, but that would have been an interesting concept to do that. And copy the Beatles again. You don't have an original bone in your body, Rolling Stone. But even John Lennon in interviews was like, we would do something, and then Rolling Stone, their next album, would do the exact same thing, and but I don't know.
And
I love
other pressings had Jack Pyle sitting on the toilet, actually.
I love the song No Expectations off of that album. That's just great. That album is fantastic. And that was
great.
I was going to go with that or Let It Bleed, but I figured I'd go back a little bit because I kind of thought somebody else is surely going to talk about one of those albums. And that's just amazing, and the song Sympathy for the Devil, lyrically, that's just a great song. I mean, that's just Mick Jagger at his peak right there. It's just a great, fantastic album. Okay, we are up to number 1, and I can't even show you the album of it because I have the album framed up on my wall because it's that good. It's already been talked about, but Led Zeppelin, their debut album from 1969. What a way to end the 60s. And, this is basically kicking off the 70s right here. There's just, Jeff already talked about it quite a lot, but, there's just everything on this album. You are introduced to Led Zeppelin. And it, just like you said, Chris, they're showing you their hand right here. This is everything kind of what we're going to do as we progress, right here. We're going to take the blues and we're just going to really amp it up, but we're also going to have this soft, folky side to us. We're going to have some mystery to us. We're going to have one of the greatest drummers in rock and roll history. You're going to be introduced to him on this album. You got Jimmy Page, who, out of the Yardbirds, right? This band started from the ashes of the Yardbirds. Everybody left but Jimmy Page. And so, they were called the New Yardbirds. They did a tour of Scandinavia or wherever, and they were called the New Yardbirds, but they were doing songs from this album. They went and recorded it in, small amount of time. Jimmy Page paid for all the recording. He had that much faith in the band. He went and got a couple of guys from the Black Country, right? He got Robert Plant and John Bonham. He found his old friend, John Paul Jones, who was also a session musician. So you had like a couple of new guys and you had these other experienced guys, and they just combined to form magic. Led Zeppelin, to me, is just, nobody has topped them. They're just the greatest rock and roll band in my mind. And just like you guys said, I guess I'm just repeating everything you basically said, but the blueprint for everything is right here. Some of this stuff, like Dazed and Confused, Jimmy Page had already been doing a version of that with the Yardbirds, but they added to it, and now he had a better singer in Robert Plant. And they did the whole back and forth thing, mimicking each other. And he took the violin bow and he expanded on it. He'd already been doing that with Yardbirds, but he added to it now. And just like we talked about the Doors, there's definitely a sense of menace with Led Zeppelin and mystery. There was always rumors going around about Led Zeppelin, and they just took the world by storm. They had a a manager with Peter Grant who just made these demands of, he was like a gangster kind of guy. And they basically pushed their way through the musical landscape at that time. And they, you know, they did all the groupies, they did all the drugs, they did everything. And they were kicking ass the entire time while they were doing it. Led Zeppelin, you know, there'll never be another band like this. So Led Zeppelin 1 has to be on my list, and it's coming number 1, 1969.
Now,
I could have
Gary,
put Led Zeppelin too.
Gary, when you say they're the greatest band of all time, are you factoring in Sweet FA?
That's just my opinion, obviously. You know,
What people don't realize is that
Aaron, I'm just representing for you, buddy.
the name Led Zeppelin, actually, that was coined by Keith Moon and John Entwistle. At the time, they were fighting with, you know, they were unhappy because Pete Townsend was a prick, Roger Daltrey was a dick, and they were like, we're going to break out, we're going to form our own band, we're going to form a super group. What we should call it Led Zeppelin because it's going to go over like a lead balloon. You know, it was like a, you know, kind of a play on words. And they just kind of were joking around. They were at a pub with Jimmy Page, and Jimmy Page is like, that's a great name. And so he kind of stole their idea, you know, when he actually formed Led Zeppelin. But
yeah, because those guys all worked on on Beck's Bolero, which is on that Truth album that I originally showed. And that's, yeah, they all had, like you said, they all kind of farted around with the idea of, oh yeah, we'll form a group. Fuck you, Pete Townsend.
yeah.
But then they realized, yeah, that'd be stupid.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I can't believe I got to follow Led Zeppelin 1 with this next record. But, this is going to confuse people. I know it is, but I don't really give a shit. Number 1 is the Monkees Present. Okay. And again, I know I'm following Led Zeppelin.
I love the Monkees.
So all seriousness, and Jeff knows, this is my favorite Monkees record. And I know I'm following Led Zeppelin. We can't compare Led Zeppelin to the Monkees. I love the Monkees. I have to have the Monkees in here. I just always have loved this record, and I've talked about this record so many times. You know, the thing I like the most about the Monkees is Michael Nesmith. And I love the country vibe that Michael Nesmith brought to the Monkees. And some of his best songs are on here. He does a song called Good, Clean Fun. He does a song on here called Never Tell a Woman Yes. This was originally supposed to be a double record, but Peter Tork left and it became just a single record. And, you know, if you like the Monkees, there we go. It's on. Yeah, I got it on cassette too. If you like the Monkees, you might not even know this record because a lot of people only like the early Monkees stuff. I tend to like the later stuff. Like I like Present. I like Instant Replay. I even like Changes. I love Head. That didn't come out right. But Monkees Present, is it the best album of the 60s? No, but it's one of my favorites, and it's definitely my favorite Monkees record.
Oh, I'll vouch for it, Chris. I mean, and there weren't doing anything different in 1969 that they were doing in 1966 or 1967. They were still, you know, I mean, Mickey Dolenz actually emerged as a great songwriter, you know, I mean, with the Headquarters album, and didn't really have much of his featured again until, you know, Peter Tork left the group. But you got some fantastic tracks on there. I agree. That is my favorite Monkees album. I go on record as saying that.
Yep.
It's almost like the Monkees White Album. You've got such a diversity of styles on there. I love Girl. You know, you got that jazz guitar is it Short Rogers or somebody who's playing jazz guitar on there?
I don't know who it is, but it's the same guy who plays on their song Valerie.
Yeah, and like they've got a perfect companion piece to Good Night that closes out the album with Pillow Time. It's sort of like the Monkees version of Good Night. And yeah, it's just there's a lot of great moments on there. And nobody knows what the hell that album is. People kind of, anybody who's even a hardcore Monkees fan, they're all about Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones, or Headquarters, or that early stuff. But if you spend some time with that record, it will definitely grow on you. And I love that record.
But you're right. Mickey Dolenz did some great writing on here. He did Mommy and Daddy, Bye Bye Baby Bye Bye, which is great. And this has my favorite Monkey song and probably my favorite Nesmith song, Listen to the Band.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's a killer song. And you're right, though. They were taking chances on this record. I mean, the French song that Davey sings, I mean, that is just sort of, that's like, I don't know how to describe the music of that. It's just, they were taking chances. It wasn't like straight pop music.
Yeah, it's like a soundtrack to a French noir movie, that particular track.
They were just all, and I don't know. I mean, Michael Nesmith, he does get mentioned in the whole thing with country rock, but he needs to be mentioned more. I know people mention the Byrds and, the Eagles, of course, and, Flying Burrito Brothers and Graham Parsons and all that. But Michael Nesmith's got to be up there with country rock. I mean,
well, Good Clean Fun is a great track on there.
Yeah. And that's what I liked about the Monkees. They had steel guitars on their albums. I mean, it's like, I don't know. The Beatles weren't doing that.
I kind of feel like with the Monkees that they, as popular as they were, they are still an underrated band.
Yeah.
Because people want to look at them as just, this made for TV band. And, they were nothing but these little poppy songs. But those pop songs were great songs that they had written by great songwriters. But then they went on to start writing their own material and playing their own songs. And, all this stuff that you're talking about here that the majority of the people don't know, they don't appreciate. The Monkees made several great records, and they match up with anybody else in the 60s. They were not just, a fabrication. They ended up being a real band.
And I'm going to say this too, since we're on the Monkey soapbox here. Anybody out there who has never checked out Michael Nesmith's solo records with the First National Band, you have to check those records out. They are country rock, but amazing. He's got some great records that he did post Monkees. You've got to check those out.
Nice.
There we go.
Much like Chris said, I'm not saying that my pick is better than Led Zeppelin 1, so no one crucify me. This is just what the album from the 60s that I listen to the most, and it won't come to a surprise to the gentlemen here because they know what a big fan I am. But Neil Young, everybody knows this is Nowhere. This album just totally kicks some major ass. I know most people, Harvest is their favorite, but I think the two albums preceding Harvest blow the doors off of Harvest. This has got Cinnamon Girl, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, Round and Round, Down by the River, song about killing your girlfriend down by the river. Just sick, amazing guitar solos on this album. The Losing End, Running Dry, and then they end it with Cowgirl in the Sand, which is a 10-minute epic. When you see them in concert, it becomes like a 20 to 30-minute epic of just feedback and guitar solos. This is with Crazy Horse. When I was a kid, my father said, whenever you see Crazy Horse next to Neil Young, you know you're in for something good. And he was absolutely right. Just absolutely love this album. That's it. I mean, I love Led Zeppelin 1 too. Don't get me wrong. Led Zeppelin 1 kills. And it's a fantastic album. But, this is just my personal favorite for top of the 60s.
Yeah, it was tough that we had to follow Zeppelin 1, but
yeah, it's tough because theoretically, if you had a gun to my head, I might switch my pick. But
that album, that's no slouch of an album. I mean, Cinnamon Girl.
Yeah.
And Down by the River influenced Chris Farley even.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's my second favorite Neil Young after the Gold Rush, which
After the Gold Rush is my favorite. It's got to be one of my favorites. I mean, I switch it all the time, but After the Gold Rush is even better of an album. You're absolutely right.
That's a cooler record. That's a cooler record than Monkees Present.
I wouldn't go that far.
but I don't care.
It's a cool record though, and it's got some amazing guitar solos on it.
But Neil Young played guitar on a Monkees album.
Yeah.
He played guitar on You and I. He's the lead guitar.
Oh, okay.
That song.
I did not know that.
Did Anne Murray make any records in the 60s? Yeah, she did.
Her and Neil Young did that album together. During his early Geffen, those albums they made in the 80s.
He made an Anne Murray's duets album.
Yeah.
See, Neil Young was grunge before there was grunge. Neil Young was doing grunge back in the 60s. And I'll throw the Stooges in there too.
Oh, yeah.
I know Stooges are kind of punk too, but
the Stooges' first album came out in 1969. That almost made my list.
Yeah, I mean they were doing grunge. They were doing grunge way back in the 60s.
If Dirt would have been,
was grunge before there was grunge.
Funhouse.
Yeah,
Funhouse is a great record.
Yeah, that's a great one too.
That song.
Could I have this dance influence Nirvana?
Yeah, Anne Murray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, underneath, Kurt Cobain used to wear that green sweater thing. Underneath there, he did wear an Anne Murray t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The cardigan.
Cardigan, yeah, that's what I was
looking for. You wrapped it under the cardigan?
Yeah.
We should all go buy Anne Murray t-shirts.
Yeah, if you peel back the cover of Nevermind.
Well, and she said, Anne Murray has admitted that, Could I Have This Dance was directly influenced by When You Love You Can Really Dance, or whatever the fuck that song is called off of After the Gold Rush, or whatever the fuck. Was that?
Yeah, when we dance.
Yeah.
We can really love.
Yeah. Isn't the album Trans about Anne Murray?
What's that supposed to mean?
Yeah, what are you saying there, buddy? Hey, we're all inclusive. We love everyone.
We are, yes.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron, can you just off the rails? Will you realize?
I'm not even drinking.
So my number one is my favorite album of the 60s. Period. Better than any of them. I don't care. And it's already been shown. So it's a White Album.
Nice.
That album sucks.
Yeah. but like my favorite songs are Everybody's Got Something to Hide, except for Me and My Monkey. I think that and Helter Skelter are two of the first metal songs. That's got that. It's so fast and it's almost metal. And Your Blues, most belligerent song they ever did. I love Your Blues. Those lyrics in Your Blues, man. And everyone knows this album. I don't need to talk too much, but it's just like you were saying. It's got every style, even Don't Pass Me By. The Ringo song has a country influence. But other than that, this is my favorite album of the 60s, of course. It had to be in there. But this is my favorite Beatle record. Always has been. Followed by Abbey Road, Magical Mystery Tour, and Revolver. So yeah, it's just a masterpiece, of course.
Now I need it on vinyl. You guys are all showing it on vinyl. You bastards.
Yeah, you don't have it on vinyl?
No.
No, that's too bad. Yeah, it's.
That's too bad. That's too bad.
This is a really old copy.
You need it. I'll send you one.
You know what I'll do? Maybe I'll show Pink Floyd The Wall and just lie that it's the White Album.
There you go. Well,
hold it back like this.
Yeah. But yeah, it's my favorite of the 60s. Yeah. All the other ones are ones I really love. This is actually my very favorite album of the 60s. Period.
No, I agree. That'd be my favorite album also. Followed very closely by Abbey Road, maybe. But
yeah, that's mine. Those two, and then Magical Mystery Tour and Revolver. Those are my top four. And then after that, it's kind of Rubber Soul, Sgt. Pepper, Yellow Submarine.
I don't know if anybody mentioned it or not, but the song "Dear Prudence" off of this, I love that song. I think
it's a great one.
That's what I mean.
About Anne Murray.
They're just like, Dear Prudence is amazing. And, even like I Will. I love that song.
Yeah. Glass Onion.
Glass Onion with all those references like you were talking about.
Yeah,
I like happiness. Happiness is a warm gun.
Yeah. Why don't That's great.
It's a great album.
And even Birthday. I mean, that's like, I don't know why that didn't become like the birthday song for every kid's birthday party, really.
Right.
Well, that was an album that was a song actually that was not on the Escher demos, whatever how you pronounce it. But they had they actually there was a movie that came from the 1950s that had all of like their favorite rock and roll artists on it. It had like I think Little Richard, and it had I don't know if it had I don't know, but it had a bunch of like their 50s idols on it. And they left the studio to go home and watch it because it was being broadcast like that night. They went home and watched it. And then when they came back to the studio, they recorded Birthday. So they kind of captured that spirit of like the early rock and roll and their idols and whatnot. But
well, maybe we should start doing that. I think when we celebrate people's birthdays, when somebody starts singing happy birthday to you, just push them out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Start singing. You say it's your birthday.
I like it.
Have a good time.
The drumming on that song just has a driving drum beat. Really
yeah.
Yeah. Or sing Piggies,
I love that too. I like Wild Honey Pie is one of my favorites.
Happy birthday, Junior. We're going to sing a song called Piggies to you.
Yeah. And then we'll listen to Jack Pyle.
I didn't even mention maybe the best on there, one of them, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which is the only Beatles song that had the only one that had Eric Clapton played the lead guitar on that, and it's the only song they ever used a guest musician in.
Yeah. I guess Clapton was like nervous about doing that. He goes, I don't know if I want to go in there with the Beatles. And George Harrison basically said, it's my song. I'm asking you to come play on it. So
they did a tour together of Japan, and they released an album, Harrison and Clapton live in Japan. Came out like in the 90s, I think, like right after like the Wilburys time period. But yeah, and that was a fantastic live album.
Is that called Clapison?
What's that?
Is it called Clapison?
No, it's not.
Was it called Rectum?
No.
Blow it out your rectum.
Vincibus Rectum?
I'm talking about a serious live album here, guys. I'm not mentioning blue balls or rectums or anything this week.
I would really like to hear that, actually.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You should seek it out.
Wait a minute. They did it when?
It came out in the 90s. It was a George Harrison live album from Japan with Eric Clapton. Yeah, Google it, guys.
I wonder, did they do the song Badge on it? That'd be cool.
Hold on. I'm pulling it up.
Did they have George Harrison sing the lead vocal for Layla?
No.
He goes, damn it, I know what this song is about.
You talking about this one?
That's it right there.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh, nice.
Oh. Is Badge on that, Jeff? That would be really
great TV.
It's hard to see with this light. My vision's not what it used to be. I don't think it is, but anyway.
I feel like it's Bob Uecker in Major League. Christ, I can't find it. The hell is it?
I know. The older I get, I'm starting to like hold things back further now.
What? Yeah.
Everybody go out and listen to the George Harrison live album. We'll talk about it next week.
That was a very connected song between those two, though. That's why I was wondering. Yeah. And it's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
It's a good song.
Jeff gives us his number one pick.
All right. Well, my number one has already been mentioned. Gary stole my thunder on this one, but of course, what band have I not mentioned yet? What band did I not cover? Very easily, I could have picked the White Album. The White Album is my favorite album, might be my favorite album of all time. But, again, I knew Aaron was going to pick it because I know that's Aaron's favorite album. So I went with Revolver because this is when the Beatles were really at the height of their innovation. If you go track by track on here, not a single one of these tracks could have fit on Rubber Soul, which was the album previously. You know, Taxman, no. Eleanor Rigby, no. Love You Too, no. Here, There, and Everywhere, maybe. Yellow Submarine, She Said, no. I mean, they were just moving so fast and they were progressing at such a rate. I mean, could you imagine Tomorrow Never Knows on Rubber Soul?
No.
You know, Got to Get You Into My Life on Rubber Soul, no. You know, For No One, you know, would have sounded out of place on Rubber Soul. I mean, that's just how quickly and how, you know, much. And this is only a couple months after Rubber Soul had been released. Rubber Soul was released, I think, December of 1965. And then in the summer of 1966, already you have this album, which is light years ahead of anything that was on Rubber Soul. And so, I mean, it's just really staggering when you think about, you know, how quickly things were progressing in the 60s. And Tomorrow Never Knows was the first track that they recorded for this album. So just, you know, really impressive, but, you know, Good Day Sunshine's a great track. And Everywhere, which was inspired by the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, you know, She Said, just a great, fantastic collection of songs. Do I like Abbey Road better? Yes. Do I like the White Album better? Yes. Do I like Sgt. Pepper? Probably. But, you know, for the purposes of this, you know, I love this album. And, you know, it's just really a staggering accomplishment. The only reason this album isn't ranked higher is because of, you know, what came afterwards. But if the Beatles had broken up after this album, they still would be, you know, regarded so highly. But yeah, Revolver is going to be my number one pick.
Great one.
That's a good point of how much they evolved in that short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they really did. That's a wonderful point that you made, and to me, I guess that's why I picked that album too. Is just it's so innovative. You know, do I think maybe that the White Album is, you know, better because it has so many songs, so many great songs? Yeah, but that point right there, that's like, you know, it's just such a moment in time, and they just went so far ahead, and they were just showing, you know, hey, we can do whatever we want. And, you know, we're leading the pack here. You were talking about the Stones kind of following them a little bit. The Beatles were once again, we're leading the pack. Here we go. Here's what we came up with now. And it's a statement album.
Yep. No question. Well, that was a fun little exercise there. And I mean, all the records on anybody's list, I could easily, you know, pick for my own. But I'm glad we had enough diversity out there, and there was still some, you know, overlaps as well. But 60s was such a great era. That was such a hard list to compile because there were so many records I left off of here. You know, like Buffalo Springfield Again, I wanted to put on here. Are You Experienced? You know, was another great one. Some CCR stuff very easily could have been on here. Guess Who?
Yeah. Guess Who?
Most definitely. But yeah, it's a fun list. So, you know, nobody's watching still at this point. We're almost hitting 2 hours here, but you know,
the biggest omission probably.
yeah, Cream.
Hey, since nobody's watching, if there is that one person watching, I pulled up the George Harrison, just so you know. It was recorded in 92, and the songs are I Want to Tell You, Old Brown Shoe, Taxman, Give Me Love, If I Needed Somebody, Something, What Is Life, Dark Horse, Piggies, which is crazy, Got My Mind Set on You, Cloud Nine, Here Comes the Sun, My Sweet Lord, All Those Years Ago, Cheer Down, Devil's Radio, Isn't It a Pity, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Roll Over, Beethoven.
Wow.
No
Wow.
Ballad of the Woman in Hell.
No Ballad of the Woman in Hell. They did not cover Jack Pyle. Hey, but that's a pretty good set list.
That's a great.
That is, yeah. I love it.
I need to get that. I'll be after that one.
Go find it.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. As always, we'll be back next week with another compelling list. And everybody take it.